Hi, and welcome to my new project in making a fully functional game character. In this series, I will go through the whole process and talk about my decisions and intentions behind the development. In this video, I'll be talking about character design. Most of us know that we start out with the concept, the idea that we want to explain so other or oneself can better understand the idea as a whole. And for my case, I wanted to visualize something through a drawn picture, or as many of you have heard of as concept art. But in this video, there is no concept art, because I simply went ahead to get the idea from my head down on paper as fast as possible, and went directly with the idea I came up with a while back when I was thinking about what I should be doing after finishing my 100 Women challenge. What you're actually seeing me doing in this video is in a way exploring and finding the potential ways of the design can turn into, and slowly find a befitting version that fits the concepts. Before I start talking about my actual process, I want to go into talking about what my concept or idea is about. The idea came to be when I wanted to improve my animation skills for my career choice, which is about becoming an animator. So I came up with an idea about making a fully functional 3D character that I could use to animate and make videos at the same time. Of course, there are some royalty-free content that you can even use for commercial use, as in you can still use it in your videos and be monetized at the same time. But I didn't want to involve myself in legal reasons and stuff, so I thought it could be easier if I just made a model from scratch and avoid it altogether. I also believe by making an original character, I will attract an audience that will come for the sake of the character and the content that comes with it. So, the idea is about making a character that is a thing, a tool for me to animate, use, make it do whatever I want with it. It should be born as a blank object that is cast into an empty prison that is forced to do all kinds of actions for the sake of entertainment. And the word blank just hit me as a white sheet of paper. A character with no backstory, goal, or whatsoever. For me, it was a no-brainer to design visually a character that was based on a sheet of paper and give it a personality that was empty as such. An emotionless, humanoid object forced to entertain the viewers and maybe slowly become more aware of its existence and gain new traits. But before I came to that idea, I went with something completely different. Way before I even made the script, I was way too focused on one idea that I had, and did not let myself explore what the character could have been, like the one I had just thrown out. And with that, I never let myself explore the theme of a sheet of paper that slowly gets written on, and went directly with a quick idea I had in my head when starting a project. While starting out the rough sketches, I went after the design's intention, simple and recognizable. It is, in my opinion, usually a guarantee to make the character identifiable, so nothing too crazy. But the other reason as to why I chose to make it simple was because I wanted to make it easy for me when I'm going to create it in Blender. I also wanted the character to be flexible so it would be able to do extreme movement when animating. So its clothing was going to be close to a fitness type of wear or very loose for the body to move in. From that, I already had a lot of restrictions, but they are good restrictions, cause it leads me to the idea I'm going for. But you should never have too many restrictions or ideas for that matter, cause then you won't be able to let yourself be creative. And the most fun part about sketching all these illustrations is being able to come up with anything that comes to your mind, and not being worried about keeping track of so many things, especially when you're just in the moment and not listening to any conflicting thoughts. And not to worry, you can always take care of your concerns afterwards. But the restrictions does not end there. You also have to take into consideration on what your idea is based on, especially when you're creating something from real life. When drawing after something that is based on real life or just based on anything really, one should probably go and study the source, the thing you're basing your design on. And that is where a lot of reference materials come in. It really helps you to understand its boundaries and how it interacts with the character or anything else. There are lots of ways you can get a picture throughout the internet, and the way that helped me get lots of pictures fast in one place was Pinterest. From there, I went and picked anything that was related to what I was seeking and had potential things I could use for my design. But do not be too over-reliant on them. They are a great way to learn, but you should never let it control on how your idea should be and let it diverge too far from it. We have now reached the point where I had made enough examples to start deciding on which direction my design should take. They're all rough and quickly made because I wanted fast results and didn't want to put too much effort into small details that would most likely not enter the final stage of the process. And most of all because I didn't want to use another 6 months on a project. This first stage of designing my character is really just to find a direction on where your design should lead towards. Though I think you might need to clean it up a bit in more serious working places, so a director can piece together what abomination you've just made. Now, all of these sketches held up to my restrictions about creating something that was loose, flexible and easy to make in Blender. I hope. All that was now left for this stage was to find the one that looked the coolest. And you will most likely know it when you see it. But other than just finding something that tickled my neurons, I was looking for something that could make the character stand out more. I looked through the sketches and found something that was odd. I had given the character some shoes that had some claws. They looked highly impractical, but it was the one that stood out the most to me. Now, I usually don't worry too much about characters standing out from other characters throughout the entertainment industries, because I believe that in our present day, there are plenty of designs that can be compared to each other and even look alike. And I've seen people who could still tell them apart, simply because they watched or grew attached to a character. It is perfectly normal to tell apart a person you know very dearly when you see them lined up to a crowd of people. But if you do notice that some designs today have been following a trend and you can feel that people started to grow tired of the design, you could probably try to avoid it if you can. But not to worry, because I also have another idea that the audience won't care about a design choice as long as the character is well written. Now, in the next step, I did almost the same as before where I made multiple designs. But the difference is that you now have a more specific lead to follow from the last design you picked up. I then start out with combining the last designs together, and from there I created even more versions of it, but did not stray too far from the direction I had set the design for. We must remember that the potential of what your design can become is vast, and we should always try to experiment to see what the design can become. I was for now satisfied with the closing of my character, but before I could continue to the next stage, I still need to take a look at the character's face, and one of the most important parts to express your character's emotion and personality. While doing so, I still tried to follow my restrictions by going for something that would be easy to make, and something that would work well together with the character's flexibility. So I had to make the haircut short, or come up with something that wouldn't hinder the character's movements too much. I at the same time also tried to come up with the character's personality and played around with facial expressions. Was the character mean and gave you the feel that she would not be very approachable, or did the character give you a kind look and made you feel much safer by standing beside her? That part of the process by exploring the personality is something that was meant more for the next step, and I already had a clear idea what I wanted to go for, but I still wanted to take the chance of learning the character's potential and what it could become. Lastly, I found something that fitted the character I was after. It had that wavy, calm hair that made the design more approachable, giving one the impression that she could be kind. And just before I greenlit it, I came up with a quick version I could use as a reference when going for the next step. Now, this is the part where I have mostly reached the point where I'm done with the character's visuals, but not done with designing the character's personality. This part of the process was really about exploring the traits that came from my main idea. I chose to make the character willing but apprehensive, always looking for new tasks but too hesitant and worried when they came up. Now, I will say that I did not utilize this part of the process properly, because I did not draw more sketches of the characters doing things that related to its personality. I didn't draw enough scenarios where the character was being apprehensive, nor did I draw her being willing for that matter. But that is not to say that I did not gain anything from this stage. I still figured out the character with his personality would react while doing some certain actions. From that, I could get to know the character better and understand it in the future. Another thing I should have experimented before I came was the color scheme I should have gone for. I skipped that step and jumped immediately into this first idea I had and colored it blue and black. But I will say that following the steps for designing a character is not something you shall and must do at all times, but should merely be taken as a suggestion. I presume that most artists have their own way of making art and never really make a step-by-step process. The one reason I can come up with as to why people keep bringing up step-by-step tutorials is simply because it is easier to understand and follow while learning. And through this process I am making right now, you have probably seen me switch back and forth a few times, because a new idea suddenly came by, and I wanted to test it out in an earlier drawing, or because I regretted every decision I had made up to this point, yell at myself, and ask what the hell I was thinking when creating this idea and backtrack to the start. So when designing any kind of art, expect to go back and forth a lot. But before I ended this stage, I still took the chance of seeing what else I could do with the characters, and change its colors for any potential. But in the end, I still ended up with the blue theme. But I will say it was not in vain, because I still learned something that might be useful for other ideas in the future, and I would most likely have regretted not taking a look at it, because I might have found something that could have worked. We must remember, when designing a character, we must explore and find potential ideas that can fit the concept we are going for. Now we have gotten to the final stage of designing the character, and the purpose of this part is to fully visualize your creation to the smallest detail, so it is ready for when you're starting your production in 3D. Though in my case, I didn't really bring any smaller details. I would have been smarter if I went back some stages or made one before this one and sat down to really make sure that the design held together. What I mean is that the design should in some extent make sense realistically, since the design is based on realistic aesthetics, and people with a keen eye will quickly see if something is off, and it will in some level break the experience for them. It will also be a lot easier to see how it is put together when bringing it into geometry. It's all fun and games until you have to figure out how that shoe fits together. I personally went to the next stage because I was already very confident in my last page I had drawn, and was convinced that I had enough information to make the last illustration while making the last adjustments. And this for me was not really hard, cause there isn't a whole lot to look after, other than the shoes, but you should still take into account to have a proper look at the rough sketches before finishing the design, cause in the end, the final stage for me is not to experiment or make some last adjustments, cause this is the final version. But do note that this is a suggestion, and you're still allowed to change when things are needed. Like I said before, the process is never really linear, only want you to understand the purpose of this stage. Now, I was glad with how the illustration was coming along, but after I finished drawing it down, I ended up missing some crucial things to turning this into a proper reference. I will explain some of them here. First of all, the pose. The extreme movement the character is performing while jumping is making it quite difficult to see the whole character's body, which is important to understand when you're going to use it as a reference when you're making a model from it. Of course, I don't think I will suffer as much since I already had a clear idea what the character looks like, but I bet that if you're giving it to a fellow colleague, they would most likely not be able to tell their pants apart if they were either tight trousers or loose baggy pants. So, it is important to make sure not to overdo the character's movement and make sure it is simple so one can better piece together what the whole outfit looks like. And since this stage is about fully visualize your creation, then that means you're also supposed to give a proper look at how the back looks like. And just in case you didn't notice, I forgot to include that too. If you have nothing to work from, then you will end up winging it and hope that it will fit with your overall design when building the model. Now, another thing I want to add is something that kind of justifies my decision to shade and render the whole character. Usually, when you need fast results, you don't use a whole lot of time in finishing an illustration. But in this case, I think it's important to show what kind of material the character has, and that is something you can't really show by only drawing flat colors. By shading and rendering the character, it will become much more clear to see which part is made of metal and which part is made of fabric. And it will help out a lot in the long run when reaching the part where I'm making textures for the 3D model. This whole illustration is something you will use all the way when making a game character. Now, we have finally reached the end of this video. I do want to apologize if I sounded off and didn't make a whole lot of sense throughout the video. I'm certainly going to be more clearer for the next video, where I'm going to immediately start out by sculpting the model in Blender, so do click it if you catch an eye on it. This is it for now, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next part of this project.